The doctors didn't lower their voices when they said it. They didn't pause. They didn't soften the words. Your vocal cords are permanently damaged. You will never sing again. In that moment, his world didn't break loudly, it went silent. If you've ever been told your dream is over, stay with this story until the end, because what happened next is something no one saw coming. His name didn't matter back then. In his small town, he was just the boy who sang. He sang at school events, at weddings, in quiet streets late at night when everyone else slept. Singing wasn't a hobby for him, it was the only place he felt complete. When life felt heavy, his voice carried him somewhere lighter. People used to say, "You were born to sing," and he believed them with his whole heart. Then came the accident. One moment of chaos, one harsh injury to his throat, and months of hospitals replaced stages. Tubes. Tests. Pain. Silence. When he finally asked the question he was terrified of, "Will I be able to sing again?" The answer crushed him. Broken forever. Those words echoed louder than any applause he had ever received. He went home and packed away his microphone, his notebooks filled with lyrics, even the old recordings he couldn't bear to listen to. Days turned into months. He worked odd jobs, avoided music, avoided people who asked him to sing. At night, when the world was quiet, he would sometimes hum under his breath, then stop in fear, remembering what the doctors said. Every attempt reminded him of what he had lost. But deep inside, there was still a small, stubborn spark. A voice, not in his throat, but in his heart asking, what if they're wrong? He started therapy, not just for his voice but for his soul. Progress was slow. Painful. Some days, no sound came out at all. Other days, it sounded nothing like the voice he once had. People told him to be realistic, to move on. Even those who loved him wanted to protect him from more disappointment. Years passed. One night, scrolling aimlessly, he saw a clip from America's Got Talent. Ordinary people, impossible dreams. The judges' faces when something unexpected happened. He laughed at himself at first. Him? On that stage? With a broken voice? It felt ridiculous. But that same stubborn spark flared again. If he failed, at least he would fail trying. He sent in the audition tape with shaking hands. He didn't tell anyone. When the email came saying he was selected, he stared at the screen for a long time, convinced it was a mistake. On the flight to the audition, fear sat heavier than hope. He wasn't going there expecting a miracle, he was going there to close a chapter. Backstage, surrounded by confident singers warming up, doubt screamed in his head. His throat felt tight. His hands trembled. He thought about walking away. Then he remembered the boy who sang in the streets, the nights he cried because silence hurt more than pain. He stepped onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The judges smiled politely, unaware of the battle inside him. "What's your story?" they asked. He told them the truth. The accident. The diagnosis. The words, "never sing again." The audience grew quiet. Some looked sympathetic. Some looked skeptical. He took a breath. A deep, terrifying breath. The music started. The first note came out soft, fragile, and real. Not the voice he used to have, but something new. Something raw. As he sang, emotion replaced fear. Years of loss, pain, hope, and stubborn belief poured into every word. The room changed. Judges leaned forward. Audience members wiped their eyes. This wasn't just singing, it was survival. By the time he finished, there was a moment of silence. The kind that feels infinite. Then the room exploded. Applause. Tears. Shock. One judge whispered, "That's not a broken voice. That's a miracle." When the votes came in, it wasn't even close. Yes after yes. His knees nearly gave out. Backstage, he cried, not because he had won, but because he had been heard. That performance didn't erase the pain of the past, but it gave it meaning. He didn't get his old voice back. He got something stronger, a voice shaped by struggle, courage, and refusal to quit. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're finished, that your dream is impossible, remember this story. Sometimes broken doesn't mean over. Sometimes it means different. And sometimes, different is exactly what the world needs. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Because the next miracle might be yours. After that night on the AGT stage, nothing felt real to him. The applause still rang in his ears long after the curtains closed, but when he sat alone in the quiet dressing room, he placed a hand on his throat as if to confirm it had really happened. For years, this part of him had felt like a graveyard of broken dreams, and now, suddenly, it was alive again. Not healed in the way doctors once defined healing, but alive in a way that mattered far more. News of the audition spread faster than he ever imagined. Clips of his performance flooded social media. Strangers commented that they felt goosebumps, that they cried, that they replayed the song again and again because it reminded them of their own battles. For the first time since the accident, he wasn't just surviving, he was connecting. His voice, once labeled useless, was now reaching people he would never meet, touching hearts in places he had never seen. But the journey didn't suddenly become easy. Back at the hotel, reality crept in. He still woke up with pain some mornings. His voice still failed him at times. Doubt still whispered that this was just a moment, that the world would move on. He worried about the next round. Could he do it again? Could he handle the pressure, the expectations, the comparisons? The fear of failing in front of millions felt heavier than the fear of never trying. He called his mother late that night. When she answered, he couldn't speak for a few seconds. Then she heard him crying, not the quiet kind, but the deep, shaking release of years of bottled-up sorrow. She told him something she had never said out loud before. After the accident, when he stopped singing, she used to stand outside his room and cry silently because she knew part of her son was dying inside. Hearing him sing again even with a changed voice felt like getting him back. The next rounds of AGT tested him in ways the first audition never did. Song choices became emotional minefields. Every lyric had to fit not just his voice, but his story. He worked endlessly with vocal coaches who didn't try to fix him, but helped him understand the new instrument he had become. Some days were breakthroughs. Other days were setbacks so painful he wondered if the doctors had been right all along. One rehearsal ended with him storming out, convinced he couldn't meet expectations. A producer followed him and asked a simple question, "Why did you come here?" He didn't answer at first. Then he said quietly, "To prove I wasn't finished." The producer smiled and said, "You already did that on day one. Now just be honest every time you sing." That changed everything. When he stepped onto the stage again, he stopped trying to impress. He stopped chasing perfection. Instead, he sang like someone telling the truth for the last time. His performances weren't flawless, but they were unforgettable. Judges began calling him one of the most emotionally honest singers they had ever heard. Viewers voted not because of pity, but because they felt something real. As the competition went on, he started receiving messages from people with damaged dreams of their own, athletes with career-ending injuries, artists who lost confidence, people told they were too old, too weak, too late. They said his voice gave them permission to try again. That realization hit him harder than any standing ovation. His pain had become purpose. But just when everything seemed to be aligning, his biggest challenge arrived. Before a crucial live performance, he woke up unable to speak. Panic consumed him. Doctors examined him and warned that pushing his voice could cause serious damage. The easy choice was to withdraw, to protect what little progress he had made. That night, alone in his room, he faced the same question he had years ago: walk away, or risk everything. He remembered the silence after the accident. The emptiness. The years of regret. And he understood something clearly for the first time: losing his voice once had broken him, but losing his courage again would destroy him completely. He rested. He breathed. He trusted the process. When he walked onto the stage that night, his voice was fragile, but his spirit was unbreakable. He adjusted the song on the spot, lowering the key, letting emotion carry what power. The doctor's words echoed in his head long after he left the clinic. Your vocal cords are permanently damaged. You will never sing again. He had sat in that sterile room, gripping the edge of the chair so tightly his knuckles turned white, unable to move. The world seemed to tilt, not with a loud crash, but with a slow, invisible slide into darkness. Everything he had worked for, every late-night practice, every school talent show, every time he had sung to the empty streets when no one was listening, it all felt like it had been erased in an instant. He wanted to scream, to argue, to beg for a second opinion, but his throat could barely manage a whisper. And that whisper was the cruelest irony of all, a voice, once his lifeline, now nothing more than fragile tissue. For years, singing had been his refuge. From the time he could remember, he had felt music in his bones. His father's old guitar, his mother's lullabies, even the hum of the refrigerator, it all seemed to guide him toward song. He would sing in the school hallways when no one was looking, hum on bus rides, and belt out melodies in the shower with the kind of abandon that only children possess. Music was not just a hobby, it was the lens through which he experienced the world. Every note he sang was proof that he existed, that he mattered. And when the accident happened, when his throat was injured so severely that even speaking became a challenge, it felt like life itself had been ripped from him. At first, denial was his armor. He refused to accept that he would never sing again. He whispered to himself in the mirror, hummed when no one was around, and tried to mimic the scales he had practiced since childhood. But every attempt ended in failure and pain. Months passed. Friends drifted away, assuming he was simply choosing a new path. Teachers asked him to join school performances, but he declined, his pride as wounded as his throat. He withdrew from the world, wrapping himself in silence, afraid to show the hollow version of himself. It was during these months of quiet despair that he truly realized what the doctors had taken from him, not just his voice, but his identity. Yet, deep inside, a tiny ember of hope remained. It was so small, so fragile, that it nearly went unnoticed, but it refused to die. It whispered, what if they're wrong? That single question became the quiet pulse of his days, a secret rhythm that kept him moving forward. He began therapy not just to try and regain his voice, but to rebuild the boy he had lost. Speech exercises, breathing routines, and painstaking vocal drills became his daily ritual. Progress was slow, sometimes imperceptible. Some days, his voice faltered before it even reached a note. Other days, it emerged raw and jagged, a pale echo of what it once was. He learned to listen to his body, to respect its limits, and to celebrate even the smallest improvements. But the road was lonely. The world didn't wait for him to heal, and every glance, every comment about his absence from music, reminded him that life was moving on without him. Then came the day that changed everything, though even he couldn't have anticipated it. He stumbled upon a clip from America's Got Talent while scrolling aimlessly on his phone. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things, moments that defied logic, faces frozen in shock and awe, it captivated him. He laughed at first. Him? On that stage? With a voice that was still fragile and uncertain? The idea seemed absurd. But something shifted. The spark inside him, that stubborn ember of hope, flared. If they could believe in miracles, maybe he could try again. He filmed an audition tape in secret. His hands shook, his voice trembled, but he poured every ounce of courage into it. Weeks later, when the email arrived saying he had been selected, he thought it was a mistake. The feeling of disbelief was intoxicating. Suddenly, a path that had been closed for years was opening before him. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't want encouragement. He didn't want pity. He just wanted to see if he could do it for himself. Backstage on the day of the audition, the nerves were overwhelming. He stood among confident singers, warm-ups echoing around him, and felt entirely out of place. His throat was tight, his hands sweaty, and every step toward the stage felt like walking a tightrope over an endless abyss. He considered turning back, running away, and giving in to fear. But then he thought of the nights he had spent singing in silence, the boy who had once believed he was born to sing, the dreams he refused to bury. He stepped into the light. The judges smiled politely, unaware of the storm behind his eyes. "What's your story?" they asked. And he told them. Every word poured out, the accident, the months of silence, the despair, and the faint, unyielding hope that he might sing again. The audience leaned in, some eyes widening with surprise, others glistening with empathy. When he took a deep, trembling breath, the music began. The first note emerged softly, almost cautiously, but it carried a weight that transcended technical perfection. Every word that followed was imbued with raw emotion, years of pain, and the joy of rediscovering something he thought lost forever. By the chorus, his voice had gained confidence, a delicate strength that resonated in the hearts of everyone watching. The judges' faces transformed from polite curiosity to awe. One whispered, "That's not a broken voice. That's a miracle." The audience erupted. Applause shook the stage. He had done it. But the reality didn't hit him immediately. Backstage, as he tried to catch his breath, the tears came. Not for the victory, not for the recognition, but for the fact that he had reclaimed a piece of himself he feared he'd lost forever. The next days were a whirlwind. Social media exploded with clips of his performance, people sending messages of encouragement, admiration, and shared experiences of struggle. Strangers wrote to him about their own lost dreams, the moments they had given up, and how seeing him perform gave them hope. Suddenly, he realized something profound. His pain had become a source of inspiration. His brokenness had transformed into connection. Yet, the journey was far from over. Every round brought new challenges. His voice, while remarkable, was still vulnerable. The stress of live television, the pressure of expectation, and the physical demands of singing pushed him to his limits. Vocal coaches reminded him daily that overexertion could be dangerous. He learned to respect his boundaries while still striving for excellence. Each performance became a careful balance of emotion and technique, of heart and discipline. Some nights, exhaustion threatened to consume him, but he pressed on, guided by the memory of every time he had nearly given up. One particularly tense rehearsal left him in tears. His voice cracked repeatedly, leaving him frustrated and humiliated. He considered withdrawing, letting someone else take the spotlight. But a producer stopped him, a quiet understanding in her eyes. "Why did you come here?" she asked. He hesitated. "To prove I wasn't finished," he whispered. The producer nodded. "You've already done that. Now just be honest." Her words were simple, but they were transformative. He realized that his authenticity mattered more than perfection. When he returned to the stage, he sang not to impress, but to tell the truth. Every performance was a story, every note a piece of his journey. Judges and viewers alike were captivated not just by his technical ability, but by the depth of feeling behind each word. He was no longer just a contestant, he was a symbol of resilience, a living testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure in triumph. Yet, the greatest challenge came just before the finale. He woke up unable to speak, his voice gone entirely. Panic surged. The doctors warned that pushing his vocal cords now could cause permanent damage. He faced a choice: withdraw to protect himself, or risk everything for one final performance. That night, alone, he reflected on all he had endured, the silence, the pain, the fear, the relentless hope. He realized that failing now would be different, it would be surrendering to fear instead of facing it. He chose to try. On the night of the finale, he stepped onto the stage with a fragile voice but an unshakable heart. He adjusted the song, leaned into emotion over technical precision, and let the truth of his journey carry every note. The audience responded not to perfection, but to authenticity. By the final chord, judges were visibly moved, some shedding tears. The result was secondary, the performance itself had already achieved a victory far greater than any trophy. He did not win the competition. But in a way, he had already won everything that mattered. Offers from producers, invitations to speak at events, and messages from fans poured in, affirming that his voice, flawed yet extraordinary, had touched the world. He returned to his hometown, standing in the streets where he had once sung in secret, performing for people who had witnessed his despair and now celebrated his triumph. His voice, though changed, was a testament to survival and hope. Years later, he still faces limitations. His throat still aches after long performances, and he must rest carefully. But he no longer fears being broken. He has learned that true strength lies not in perfection, but in courage, persistence,